What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. This is more realignment conversations. ACC is on the chopping block, just like the Pac-12. We could say it's the big media manipulating the system, just like kind of like how they did with the Pac-12 with their deals and other thing. But like FSU, some controversy there. They probably were the most deserving team there, 13-0. And it really just speeds up their acceleration of what they were talking about in the offseason with Clemson, NC State, UNC about kicking ACC away and going to a different conference. And this has just shown that the committee, most of the sports analysts say that the ACC is weaker than the Big 12, which preseason, I would have argued at the beginning of the season that the Big 12 was the weakest conference in the Power 5. Two good teams were Texas and Oklahoma, and I still stand by that, where the only two teams there are Texas and Oklahoma, and they're leaving, so that conference is slowly deteriorating, and I think the ACC is also going to deteriorate in the coming years, maybe even this offseason. This is the ACC as we speak, starting next season. We don't know what Florida State and Clemson are going to do. They might leave, they might not. So let's play a game of hypotheticals. Let's say Florida State and Clemson bail out, and we'll talk about where they potentially might go. I think potentially right now they're going to go to the SEC, but there's talk that they could potentially go to the Big Ten. And let's just take out the other two outliers that didn't want their conference to expand even farther. Look at that. This team's record without NC State, North Carolina, Florida State, and Clemson, last season their record was 73-78. And you probably are asking, easy paradox, what about all the garbage games and fluff that they did? No problem, random viewer. I also did that record against Power 5 teams, this conference on the screen, without those four people. And I will say Clemson didn't help much. They were 6-6. So, and NC State had a better tail end of their season. They were 52-75. This is what the ACC would look like if four teams left. And that's not counting any other discussion, like Miami or Pitt or Duke, Virginia, Louisville, all in conversation of leaving. This record is not a Power 5 team. So I have put in a hypothesis of what the ACC do to bring back big brands to their conference. I know some of these teams might actually just go to the Big 12 instead, because ACC is kind of not a favorable conference right now. I think what could happen is ACC and the Pac-12 merge together. The Pac-2, there's Oregon State and Washington State. Just because they already have two West Coast teams, might as well add two more, really help diversify their portfolio so there's not just these two random teams on the far coast. And it makes it so Cal and Stanford don't always have to fly to the East Coast. They can still have a chance to fly up north a little bit, not too many more. And then you have that nice happy middle with SMU joining in. But this conference is still not very good. Your biggest brand here in football, I'll say in football, because Virginia is a huge brand in basketball. In football, your biggest brand is probably Washington State when it comes to viewership. Biggest brand overall is probably either Virginia or Stanford, just because Stanford is a very prestigious school in the Olympics and etc. Virginia is very good at basketball. Pitt has a pretty good following. But other than that, you have no big names. Washington State wasn't even positive this last season. Oregon State had a good year in football. And then you can try to bargain your way with ESPN here. What you need to do is add some other teams. So maybe make it an even number. You could add some of these group of 5 teams, Liberty, Tulane, Miami and Ohio, JMU, and then maybe even Boise to really just put one somewhere in the middle between SMU and Cal, somewhere in that area. But most of these other schools are generally on the East Coast. So in theory, you don't necessarily have to add Oregon State or Washington. You could just keep adding group of 5 teams, but that just hinders your conference even farther, which you can see that with the Big 12. Once Texas and Oklahoma leaves, half your conference is previously group of 5 teams that barely made a bowl game, and the other ones are Cincinnati looking really rough right now. So this is your ACC right now, and I'm going to predict if the ACC were to implode tomorrow, which It won't happen, but if they were to implode sometime this offseason or in the coming months, just completely implode, they figured out how to get rid of their grant of rights, figured out how to get past the lawsuits and everything. Maybe the ESPN, Fox have made a deal. ESPN got some of the schools from there to go to SEC, and then they were like, all right, and then all these schools voted to have certain people leave, and then maybe even keep the conference around. And my prediction is this. This looks like a big mess. I know it looks a little rough, but Pitt goes to the Big 12. Perfect fit. Big 12 right now seems like they're focusing a lot on basketball because their big football brands have left, but their basketball programs are doing really well, like BYU is excelling. Cal, Georgia Tech, I say they're going to stay in the ACC. The ACC is still going to be around. I don't think they're just going to completely dissolve. I think there's still going to be some of that, and maybe even merging with the Pac-12 to create a bigger conference, get all those assets together. I think North Carolina and Duke are going to go to the Big Ten. I'll add NC State in that conversation. NC State and North Carolina are pretty much like a package deal at this point. They pretty much vote yes on everything, except for when there's some swaying, but it seems like most of the time they're kind of together. They can just join the same conference. Duke is a better fit. Their basketball program is very phenomenal, and Big Ten do need some basketball programs in their conference. They're pulling a lot of football, but basketball still generates some revenue a little bit, and there's people still watch it. SMU, I think, is going to stay in the ACC. They put a lot of work in to get there. Boosters are like Power 5, Power 5. At this point, if all these teams left, is ACC still a Power 5? How many years do they have? Maybe SMU will try to figure out a way to get somewhere else. Boston College, I think, is still going to stay the ACC. And I would also call ACC outside looking in because none of these conferences want these teams. There's nothing to really offer for some of these programs. Yeah, they have some good programs outside of football and basketball. Maybe have a good year in basketball, but like consistency is everything. Louisville, Virginia Tech, I think they're going to go to the Big 12. Louisville has already, there's been some rumors about Louisville already in discussion with some of the Big 12 leadership, and they would be a great fit. They have a good basketball program. Their football program did really good this year, and I think they pretty much fit that mold within the Big 12. FSU, Clemson, easy picks. They're going to the SEC. Perfect for that program. FSU wants a conference that is more powerful, more dominant to prove that they are not some schluff. Clemson, same thing. They saw FSU get left out 13-0, and Clemson doesn't want to have that. Miami, I have them at either or. Big Ten has looked at Miami. Miami has looked at the Big Ten. But I would definitely think that Miami would be a better fit for the SEC just because of that regional thing. Big Ten does want to get into the Florida market. I thought about putting the Big Ten on the Florida State because at the beginning of the season, there was a lot of discussion of maybe Florida State and Clemson go to the Big Ten instead. But hit or miss there. Like we already talked about NC State. Virginia, I have going either to Big 12 or to Big 10. If Big 10's going all in on basketball with this next expansion versus only football, then I think Virginia would more likely go to the Big 10, more likely go to the Big 10. But if the Big 12 swoops in earlier, maybe pick up Gonzaga, maybe pick up Virginia, and all these other schools that have good basketball programs, because it seems like they're not really going all in on football, but they still have some good football programs, but there's like no big names left that want to go to the Big 12, so they're probably going to go more in on the basketball side just to get more revenue, be dominant conference in that. Stanford, same thing. No one really wants them. They potentially could go to the Big Ten, but I don't see it happening. They're probably just going to stay in the ACC as long as the contract stays around. They're probably not going to go anywhere until 2036, and then they'll make that decision then. Maybe Notre Dame decides to go to the Big Ten, and then they're like, hey, we want Stanford there too, so they'll bring Stanford along for the ride. Wake Forest, same thing. I have two conferences. Either they're going to the Big 12 or they're just going to stay right where they are. No one really wants Wake Forest. They're good. They're a semi-decent basketball program right there in the Carolinas, but they're kind of hit and miss every year. Some years they're really good. Some years they're bad, and their football program has not seen good in a long time. Syracuse, same thing. The Orange, I was reading an article the other day that there's a potential that it could go to the Big Ten, but I don't know why the Big Ten would want another New York school. They already are in the New York market. They already have Pennsylvania. They have New York. They have Maryland. They already in the East Coast. They're more likely going to pick teams that are in the South, more farther south. I think Virginia would probably be the highest northern school they'll pick up next. They got the West Coast. They have a lot of the Northeast. Midwest. They're trying to dig into that South. That's why Miami is probably a big fit. The Carolinas, even they were thinking about Florida State, maybe Clemson. But Syracuse, I don't think they're going to go to the Big Ten. They would be a good fit. They have a pretty decent basketball program overall. Their football program starts out pretty strong some years, but most of the time they kind of fall off. So I think Syracuse would be another team that's outside looking in. Maybe the Big 12 picks them up for their basketball program. But I think there's a lot of teams that aren't just going to get merged into another conference right away, and it's going to be a minute, maybe 5-10 years before they even get into another conference, or they start another conference entirely. That's with a new name, new power. They bring in more group of 5 teams, maybe some group of 5 teams merge. Anyway, this is what I think is going to happen with the ACC. I think there's going to feel like there will be a lot of chaos once Florida State and Clemson figure out a way to get out of their contract. Because once they do, then the sky's the limit for a lot of these programs. North Carolina, NC State, Duke, maybe Virginia, Pitt. They're already looking at ways to escape this horrible TV deal that's going on to 2036. A lot of these teams thought it was a lock. A lot of these worse for wear teams like Wake Forest, Syracuse, etc. We're locked in. We got some big names like Florida State and Clemson. But if they leave, there's gonna be a whole big deal with restructuring. ESPN is not gonna be happy, especially if Florida State and Clemson decide to go to the Big Ten, because Big Ten is more on Fox than ESPN. So yeah, well, that's going to be it for this video. Please like and subscribe if you like this kind of content. I want to go down the rabbit hole on some more teams, maybe even bring some group of 5 conversation of which of those teams deserve to go to the Power 5 after a phenomenal years. But that's going to be it. Peace.